Do you ever watch a movie and you just know, either based on the reviews or your own impression at the end of the movie, that it's not actually that good, but you just can't help but unironically really like it? Yeah. The first film on my list of movies that I probably shouldn't like is a little indie flick called The Signal from 2007. Not to be confused with the 2014 sci-fi thriller by the same name starring Lawrence Fishburne. I feel like no one really knows what movie I'm talking about when I bring this up because they always think of that movie, which is really unfortunate because this is one of my favorite movies. I saw this originally when I was just going on a horror movie binge on Netflix, and I'm really upset that it's not on there anymore because it's a lot harder to find now, and I was just really pleasantly surprised. If you've ever seen the movie VHS, it kind of has a similar concept but like a totally different tone to it. It's a movie told in multiple parts that are all filmed by different directors. So VHS is more of like a found footage movie where each piece of found footage is directed by a different director. And I found The Signal to be a little bit less cheesy because it's just a fictional horror story told in 3 different segments by 3 different directors. This movie also saves a lot in the cheese department because it actually knows what it is, and there's a segment in the middle of the movie that's kind of like a dark comedy that really breaks up the tone and makes it so it doesn't take itself too seriously, but then also doesn't go over the top with comedy, so that by the time you get to the ending segment by the 3rd director, it still makes sense, and it's still a cohesive storyline, and it still feels right. It also definitely had the potential to fall into like a stereotypical zombie movie, but it stayed with this pretty cool storyline where electronic signals were tapping into people's brains and making them act crazy and violent. Definitely something that could have gone in a really dumb direction, but I think that they handled it really well. I thought the writing was great, I thought the directing was great. Now, it doesn't have the worst ratings online, but considering that it's still up near the top of my list of favorite movies of all time, I guess I'm a little bit embarrassed by the fact that no one else seems to like it as much as I do, so that kind of sucks. The next movie on the list I am genuinely embarrassed to say, and even if you have heard of it, you probably thought it was just the same movie as one of the million other movies in this genre, but it's called Like, Share, Follow. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I like this movie. I'm very much aware that this isn't like a good film, and it's also not bad enough to be considered a so bad it's good kind of movie, but I kind of found it refreshing because it's part of a genre that's really, really popular right now, especially with like horror movies that are aimed towards young adults, and it actually does it well. Can't believe I'm admitting this. But I'm sure if you guys binge horror movies as much as I do, you've probably noticed this really annoying trend of like internet-based horror where it's like a haunted website or like a ghost in your Skype call. You guys know what I'm talking about. And I feel like since we live in an age where the majority of teenagers and adults are very tech savvy and understand a lot about computers, these movies just come across as super tone deaf. They're really unrealistic about how young people live and how people in general use the internet and like what using the internet is actually like. It just makes me wonder who directs these movies. Who thinks that like a haunted Facebook profile is actually going to be scary to the average person who watches horror movies? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So in that regard, I kind of like this movie. I'll admit it. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it, but it was fun. The movie's about a young guy in his 20s who is a streamer online, plays video games, and kind of has like these chat streams with his followers, and the way that he actually uses these platforms and the way that his audience interacts with him actually feels pretty accurate. It's like, believe it or not, whoever wrote and directed this movie actually understands what Twitch and YouTube are and like how people actually use them. Wow, what a crazy idea. The actors in this movie were actually the right age. They looked like they were in their mid-20s, and they were in their mid-20s in the story, and it was also pretty realistic as to how people in their mid-20s typically live. I feel like a lot of these like internet-based horror movies follow high school kids around and like by the time you're old enough to direct a movie, you probably forget what you were like in high school, so it's actually a really difficult age to portray as an adult. Whereas Like, Share, Follow felt like a movie about people in their mid-20s written by people in their mid-20s. It accurately represented how many people you would actually need to watch your Twitch stream in order to financially support yourself, and it was still pretty realistic with the main character living with 2 roommates around his age. Now obviously, to keep the movie interesting, there was a kind of an exaggerated storyline about a fan of the main character stalking him and finding him in real life. But when it comes down to it, this actually isn't too far out of the ordinary. Stories about like super fans of YouTubers and Twitch streamers showing up at their house or just in general crossing boundaries actually aren't that few and far between anymore. So it was kind of cool to see a movie that showed how something like that could unfold. And it honestly made me think about how cool it would be to have a little bit more of a realistic storyline where it wasn't so over the top and turned into some like slasher thriller movie at the end, that just showed how creepy it can be being a personality online and having fans who don't understand boundaries. Not that that's something that I have a lot of experience in, but considering how small my viewership is right now, it's definitely something that is a real concern for people on the internet these days, and I think it could be kind of cool for someone to delve into it. And Like, Share, Follow wasn't too bad of a start in that direction. So when it comes down to it, I am not super proud to say it, but I did like that movie. A little bit, I guess. I probably wouldn't watch it again though. This next movie is from the early 2000s, and I kind of hope that none of you remember it because I don't want you to know that I like it. But here I am, announcing that I like it on my YouTube channel by choice. So, Hide and Seek is one of the first horror movies meant for adults that I remember watching when I was pretty young, all the way to the end of it, and actually really enjoying, and I think for that reason it was one of my favorite movies for many years. I remember when I was a kid, my family and I used to go on vacation to a cabin near a lake, and we didn't have like internet access or cable TV or anything, so we would go to the local movie rental place and rent some movies, and by the time I was like 8 or 9 years old, I was allowed to watch some of these more adult horror movies with my parents if they thought that they were kind of appropriate for me. And Hide and Seek perfectly fit the bill. I was around 12 or 13 the summer that we rented it, and it's not super over the top gory or like give you nightmares kind of scary, but it was kind of creepy and I thought it was interesting, and at the time I found the twist at the end to be like the most mind-blowing thing in the world. And since I liked this movie so much, I was kind of surprised when I looked it up recently and saw how low the ratings were, until I remembered what the movie was actually about. Honestly, Hide and Seek is a super unrealistic and kind of offensive portrayal of mental illness. And as far as I'm aware, it's one of the first movies that contributed to this really shitty trend of making horror movies that are literally just centered around mental illness being the scary aspect of the movie, which I'm really glad has mostly died out. You still see it pop up occasionally, but you don't see things like the John Cusack movie Identity from around this time coming up very often. Not to get like super PC or anything, but how shitty is it to take someone who has like a very treatable and livable mental illness, which should not be represented as something that like makes you into a violent person automatically, and taking them and their mental illness and making it the center of a horror movie? Like, that sucks. That really sucks. It's super immature and it's also pretty uncreative. Also, let's be honest, the twist at the end of this movie is way more predictable than I remember it being as a kid. So that, combined with the pretty shitty and offensive storyline, makes it so, again, I probably wouldn't recommend this movie, but I definitely find myself wanting to watch it from time to time because a piece of me still really enjoys it, embarrassingly enough. Speaking of twists, what would this list be without a good old M. Night Shyamalan movie, am I right? This is one movie on the list that I am not embarrassed at all to say that I actually really enjoy. I am standing by my choice to say that I really like The Village. I think it's an excellent movie. Excellent's a little bit of a strong word, but I really enjoy it and I would recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it. I think it's worth a watch. Unfortunately, this was seen as one of M. Night Shyamalan's first bad movies that sent him into this downward spiral of making awful things that we've seen in the recent past. And I feel like I kind of get it. After Signals and after the disappointment that The Village ended up being, there wasn't really much room for him to redeem himself. I think that what threw people off about this movie was the marketing. It was advertised as some kind of like monster movie and like a thriller horror movie when realistically it was a romantic drama, which is not usually my cup of tea, but I felt like with the backdrop of something creepy and horrific, it really made it into a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I watched it not too long ago and I still liked it quite a bit. Of course, just as we would expect, it does come with a classic M. Night Shyamalan twist at the end, but if you look at the film as a standalone piece and not as the horror movie it was marketed as, or as an M. Night Shyamalan twist-a-thon, it's actually really good. And I feel like it deserves a lot more credit than it really gets. So I'm sticking by that one. This next one, on the other hand, I don't know if I can really stick by this one, and I'm honestly not sure why I like it so much. And it's another one I'm a little bit embarrassed to say. Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, was the 5th installment in that series, and I honestly don't think that it needed anything more than one movie. I think one and done would have been perfect for that franchise. They could have stuck with one movie and gotten away preserving at least a little tiny bit of their pride, but no, they had to push it and now there's a new one every single year. So when I sat down and wanted to go on a little horror movie binge again and saw that this movie was available on demand, I was expecting it to be just as shitty as all the other ones I had seen. And I was kind of surprised. I'll be honest, I haven't gone back and watched this movie again since then, and this was probably about 2 years ago that I watched this, so I'm totally going off of my original first impression of the movie, but I actually really enjoyed it. One of the main characters ends up getting these like kind of crazy superpowers in this Spider-Man-like accident, and I feel like it kind of set the storyline apart from all of the other ones because at least it was kind of creative. And as far as I remember, the imagery and the atmosphere in the movie was actually pretty scary. Not like I was sitting there genuinely scared by the end of the movie, but I found myself thoroughly entertained and I wasn't rolling my eyes at the special effects or anything, so I guess it was pretty good. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily go back and watch it again because I don't think it was that good, but I do have a general positive outlook on that movie, and if you like the other Paranormal Activity movies and you haven't seen the Marked Ones, check it out. I think that you would really like it, and if you already like that genre, then that one's probably going to be the best one. I had to save this last one to put it up at the very top of this list because not only am I fully aware that this is not a good movie at all, but I also completely unapologetically love Silent Hill. I don't care what anyone says, you can't change my mind. I love this movie, and I rewatch it regularly, so I know that it's not just a first impression kind of deal. I actually genuinely love this movie. This is another one that I probably only like for nostalgic factors, but unlike Hide and Seek, the nostalgia of this movie isn't just because I liked the movie when I first saw it, it's because Silent Hill plays such an important part in my life and will forever affect the way that I look at media and horror in general, which is a huge component of the entertainment that I consume in general. I'm a huge horror fan. The majority of movies that I watch are horror. The majority of video games that I play are horror based, and I just love Silent Hill. Silent Hill 1 was the first horror video game that I ever played in its entirety, and honestly I think it's the first video game that I ever took really seriously and dedicated a lot of time and effort into beating. And I was entirely too young to be playing it. I think I was 7 or 8 when it came out. It came out in 1999, so I think I was like 7. Anyway, my dad got the game when it first came out because he's a huge horror buff and he was so excited to play it, and he let me play it as well. and I absolutely loved it. Now I think exposing your kids to horror and scary things in general is a really difficult transition to make in their life, because you don't want to scare them, you don't want to expose them to violence or horrific images that are going to turn them into a weird kid or give them nightmares all the time. But I think that it's super important to teach your children what you should actually be afraid of and what fictional horror is. Silent Hill was such a huge factor when it came to becoming the person that I am today, and for that reason I can't help but love Silent Hill 1. We don't really have to talk about the other Silent Hill movies because I was genuinely disappointed by them, and I don't think they nailed what the first movie really got right. What this movie got wrong is probably glaringly obvious to the average moviegoer who just went to go see it thinking it was a fun horror movie and didn't really know the background of the video game or just generally isn't a Silent Hill fan, and that is that the story is kind of dumb. It's a weird mishmash of like 2 to 3 different Silent Hill video game storylines, except thrown into a weird world with a female protagonist with a husband at home that just like didn't need to be there. I don't know if like they were just trying to find an excuse to give Sean Bean a role in this movie or what, but it just felt kind of weird, and I feel like it would have just been so much better if they had just stayed true to a storyline from one of the very good games that are out there. Silent Hill is beautiful because it pulls from people's innate fears in a way that other pieces of media in the horror genre either fail to do or never even try to do in the first place. It's so genius that in every single Silent Hill storyline, the main character is isolated from the world in such a unique way. They're put into these real life locations, except they're turned into these hellscapes that they can't escape from. And to make it even worse, they're faced with these horrifying physical incarnations of their worst fears and the aspects of themselves that they hate the most. And they're forced to face those fears in such a creepy, horrifying dungeon of a world. This concept of what Silent Hill is at its core is really polished by the atmosphere that's achieved in the games. You're faced with this dichotomy of the same location where you always have this kind of ethereal, foggy, dreamlike mist, and then you're transported to a different version of that same location where everything is rotting and the walls are made out of flesh and blood and there's fire under the stairs, and it's just like this perfect physical representation of hell, and I think it's done so well, and the soundtrack in the first few games is impeccable. So the fact that this movie stayed really true to that atmosphere and this concept of transporting between 2 different versions of the same like creepy hell-like world with the exact same original soundtrack that you hear in the first game is just so good. It's so well done, and I think it was really tasteful. And maybe they could have had like less exposition dumping scenes and did a little bit better on the storyline. But overall, I think this movie is a success, and if you are a fan of Silent Hill and for some reason haven't seen this movie, please watch it. I know that you will enjoy it. And if you have seen this movie and you aren't really familiar with Silent Hill and you didn't like it, I get it. I'll totally admit it. It's maybe not made for everyone, but it was made for me, and I will forever love it. And there it is, 6 movies that I know I probably shouldn't like, but I do. By the way, do you like this shirt? That's so cool, me too. That's why I'm wearing it. A new and improved version of this shirt is now available on my website, missreaper.com/shop, which I will link in the information bar below. It's new and improved because I printed it on a different type of shirt that's way softer and cuter than this one. And the actual printing is a little bit more crisp and clear than it is on this one. So if you want your new and improved Stay Spooky shirt along with a bunch of other merch that I think is super cool and I made because it's stuff that I genuinely wear on an almost daily basis, then check out my shop, linked in the description down below. It's cute, it's fun, and it helps out my channel, so buy it if you like it. If you don't like it, then don't buy it. Anyway, hit the like button down below if you like this video, and if you like me and you like scary stuff, you're at the right place. So hit the subscribe button for more stuff from me, and I will see you next time. Bye.